Well, to our main story, the crisis in the Eurozone and fears that West Country jobs and incomes could be dragged into the mess. We can't say that we weren't warned about the euro. David Heathcote-Amery was one of those Conservatives who banged on about Europe endlessly. Now he's written a book about it.
Remember this? William Hague campaigning against the euro in Somerset. He judged that the West Country was a hotbed of resistance to the EU.
Indeed. Fionn and I are delighted to be here in Taunton as one of the first stops of the general election campaign.
It was certainly a passion for one of the party's then MPs, David Heathcote-Amery. He's one of those Conservatives Mr Cameron accuses of banging on about Europe.
It amounts to a revolution in the way we are governed. We will be submitting ourselves formally and irreversibly to a superior political authority, something we have never done.
He even resigned from John Major's government on the issue. Europe was his passion, PR skills maybe less so.
Doing my best for my constituents, that's all I have to say.
What about the report that you're intending to resign, sir?
I've got no comment whatsoever to make about that.
But are you denying it?
But now it seems his predictions were right. Greece is burning with fury over the austerity being imposed on them. Although another Euro-sceptic, Michael Portillo, with similar views to Mr Heathcote-Amery, got a surprise in a TV documentary on the crisis this week. He thought everyone would want a return to the drachma, but they didn't.
Now something I'd like to ask you all. OK, Doris. Here's a choice for you.
Yes.
Euros
Liras.
or drachmas?
Euro.
Which do you choose?
I prefer Europe, of course.
And Katrina? Which are you going to choose?
Money. Γιατί δεν μου αρέσει η δραχμή. Πιστεύω ότι θα γυρίσουμε πίσω, δεν θα πάμε μπροστά.
In the end, it wasn't Europe that dented Mr Heathcote-Amery's political career, but something far closer to home, a pile of manure on his Pilton garden. Although his expenses were more modest than most, he claimed for his fertiliser.
Heathcote-Amery.
It may have been enough to ensure his defeat.
23,700.
But the questions remain. Was he right about the EU? And what does he think will happen next?
And just to put the cat among the pigeons, I'm joined by Ken Daly, who's a pro-European Conservative and a former director of the Britain in Europe campaign. We'll chat to you in just a moment. But first, here is the book we were talking about, Confessions of a Euro-Sceptic. Do you feel that you've been vindicated?
Frankly, yes. I mean, I think it's unattractive for politicians to say, I told you so.
But you told us
and
so.
I made a lot of mistakes in politics, but I did get this one right. And I do think we are owed an apology by those who thought this was a passport to general prosperity in Europe. And it was always a political project, and the economics were always a nonsense.
But the mess has been caused by the bankers, hasn't it, and big business. It hasn't been caused by Europe.
Becky, you see, Greece is now, I'm afraid, had it, and I feel very, very strongly that the workers, the people who can't move, the poorest people, are suffering the most. The bankers are all right. The people, the Eurocrats, the people running Europe, they won't suffer. But there are soup kitchens in Athens now because, foolishly, they were brought into this madcap idea that everybody could share the same currency.
But they don't want to go back to the drachma.
Well, of course, they want someone else to pay. I mean, you know, they want the Germans to go on paying for the Greeks to pay the bankers off so they can all live happily ever after. But it isn't working. It's not going to work.
Was Mr Cameron right, then, to say you should stop banging on about Europe?
Well, I think at the time he wanted to campaign on other things, you know, foreign aid, the environment, all the things that he won the election on. But Europe is the big elephant in the room, and if we don't get this right, we're going to face a meltdown in Europe, and with very unpredictable consequences, because all these people have votes, you see, all these people are out of work now, and there's a political revolution going on in Europe, and the political class in Europe have got to get real, swallow their pride, admit they made a mistake, which is always difficult, and then we can get back to building a better, more democratic Europe, of which we can all live peacefully.
Of separate states?
Separate currencies. I want to trade together.
You want the whole thing to go under?
I want a trade zone, so we have free trade, but I don't want the fantasy that we can all share the same currency and live off each other forevermore. That just isn't working. It's a catastrophe on our hands at the minute. There's no easy way out of this, but we've got to get back to basics and build a better Europe.
All through your career you were talking about Europe. Do you accept that it became a bit of an obsession and that you perhaps lost sight of other issues?
Well, I mean, I did a lot of other things in my time in politics. I served in 5 ministries, and you know, I wasn't solely going on about Euro or banging on about it, but I mean, it is true that the way we're governed and who governs us and whether we elect them or not is very important, and you know, this is the result when we get it wrong.
Okay, let's bring in the others into the discussion. Ken Daly, he was right all along, wasn't he?
Absolutely not. I mean, David has been a latter-day Don Quixote, tilting at European windmills for about the last 25 years. He's got it wrong most of the time.
Really?
Absolutely.
Well, Europe doesn't seem to be terribly healthy at the moment.
Well, it's got problems at the moment, but as you said in your opening remarks, this is not just a Greek crisis or a Euro crisis. It's the latest chapter in the banking collapse. That is what has really put politicians and governments under pressure. And the only way that Britain and the other countries in Europe are going to tackle this is by working together across Europe, and indeed, I hope, with Barack Obama in the States.
Okay.
And they're going to need to do this before the Republican Tea Party get in. They're not going to be interested.
As Labour, I mean, Tony Blair almost took us into the Euro, didn't he?
Thankfully, Gordon Brown did persuade him not to, about the best thing that Gordon ever did. I mean, I'm very sympathetic to David's point of view. I mean, I've always been a sceptic. I just think the Euro experience and the experiment that we've been launched into without any clear idea of where it's going to end up has been an unmitigated disaster. And like David, I'm very sympathetic, not just to the Greeks, but to the Spanish, to the Italians, and even to ourselves, because part of the disconnect with politics in this country is because people no longer feel that they've got any leadership in this country because power has drained away to the Commission. But it's
still not an issue that excites most people. I mean,
No,
you'll get a full post
that.
bag. We'll get a full post bag after this programme because those people who are interested in Europe are very interested in it.
Yeah.
But most people aren't. Isn't that the case?
No, but there is increasingly an understanding about how Europe links into all manner of other things. I mean, my critique is that I'm against a single market. I mean, I'm European. I believe that we must trade, we must get cooperation with Europe. It's just that the single market is something which I think is impossible to deliver and can be, as I think we'll find out.
Is this a good time for countries to work together?
No, it's a time to work together, but I mean, you can do that in a macroeconomic framework without trying to lock yourselves. Well, what it means is that you have to have strong leadership across governments, and that's hopefully what the G8 are going to do this weekend. We're going to hear that some attempts are going to be done to relaunch, if you like, the growth in
the West Country. Do you sense that these guys have won the argument?
Not really, because if you look at the company in Wells, which I believe is trading vigorously within Europe, there are plenty of opportunities in Europe, and there are plenty of jobs created in doing business with Europe. What these two overlook completely is that until the banking crisis, the single currency has been a massive success. We've had a big increase in internal trade across Europe. This has created many new jobs. It has enabled businesses to increase their production runs, to reduce their unit costs, and to deliver a wide range of products to consumers at competitive prices. And this has been an enormous increase in the standard of living of the citizen of Europe. You don't want to believe it, David, but it's the truth.
This is nonsense.
It's not nonsense.
You could trade with people without sharing a currency. How do the Americans and the Chinese sell into Europe? They do it by trading. You don't need to share the currency.
They also have the advantage of massive home markets,
a single currency.
Longer
badly wrong.
Which helps.
And I really do think we need an apology from those people who said this was the way forward. It was absolutely essential for a peaceful and united Europe. They were wrong,
the wrong way.
And we're not going to get out of this mess unless we have the courage and the humility to admit that we were wrong about that.
Much as an argument within the Conservative Party, we've got to elevate it now into a really strong debate.
I'm not a member of the Conservative Party.
Formally the Conservative Party. We need to elevate it.
Let's just take a pause for a minute.